Britain's future is being built on building sites like this across the country that birthed the Industrial Revolution, along with a promise of homes for everyone, not just the rich. But it has a problem. The space is at a premium. The country is running out of room. A housing crisis is gripping the United Kingdom. It's pushing prices up, strangling cities and strangling growth, and putting homes out of the reach of most people. The government estimates that the UK needs around 300,000 homes a year to cope with the growing population. But only 225,000 homes were built in the year to March 2024. Labour's goal is to deliver 1.5 million new homes during their first Parliament, a period of 5 years.
This government will build 1.5 million homes that are high quality, well designed and sustainable. We will achieve the biggest boost to affordable housing for a generation, and we will get Britain building to spur the growth that we need.
Well, I'm here with Amit Oberoi, who's the head of the Considerate Constructors scheme, which manages sites like this one. Amit, welcome to Westminster Watch and thank you for joining us. Now, the government are committed to 1.5 million new homes through the life of this government. Are they actually going to be able to deliver that?
I've spoken to 1,000 workers on the ground, and this is the biggest topic that we've talked about for the last 4 or 5 years. We have a big skills shortage. We need to get more apprentices in, and we need to get a sustainable plan for the future.
Does that mean that is all down to the government to do, or actually you've got a booming future ahead if there's going to be all these new homes needing to be built? Should you be paying more, for example?
I don't think we should be paying more. I think what we need is a great plan. We need more than 1.5 million homes, everyone knows that. But what we need to do is have some short-term incentives, some medium to longer term plans, and then start looking at our education system as well. How can we actually backfill those jobs? And you would look even today at the unemployment figures. We've got more than 9 million people between the ages of 16 and 60 that we could redeploy into construction. And this is single most one of the biggest industries for the UK right now.
What is it that's holding back young people from coming into a profession that is so important to our country, building homes for their fellow countrymen and women? What is holding people back?
Nick, construction is bigger than aviation and retail combined. It contributes about 9% to the GDP, so it's very critical for UK. In the past with stereotypes, lots of different angles were discussed, but however, what we're seeing now is there's more roles than just the traditional bricklaying and or being a scaffolder as we see today. There are many other roles in construction, and it's around the schools focusing in on that. Just talking to the local site team, they've been into the schools, they've been talking actively. There is a lot of promotion that goes on, and we've released a comic book as well into construction, into schools. But what you'll see is we still need that drive and focus talking about active careers in construction. It's not what it used to be. The image of construction has changed. It's become very professional. You do have a career for life.
The Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, insists that the industry have absolutely no excuse for not hitting their target of 1.5 million new homes. You, however, Amit, have listed a lot of reasons why you don't think this may happen. So where are we going to end up? How far below the 1.5 million target will we be?
Look, I don't want to speculate on a precise number, because I think we need more than 1.5, and everyone that we've spoken to, well over 1,000 workers have said the same thing. What we need is a clear plan that needs to be executed well.
So the government aren't ambitious enough with their plan?
I would say it's a bold plan. It's good to start somewhere, but obviously we need to encourage that growth of homes. We need infrastructure built as well so we can support those new cities. So it's not just a one-shoe-fits-all approach.
If there was an MP standing next to me here, what would your number one ask be of an MP?
I think the number one criticality right here now is having a short-term measure, such as a financial incentive. The secondary would be to start working very diligently on promoting apprentices into the industry, and then looking at longer term training that's required so we can start to remobilise some of the people that are currently unemployed.
Amit Oberoi, Chief Executive of the Considerate Constructors Scheme. Thanks very much for joining us here on site with Westminster Watch.
Thank you very much.
Back in the studio, I'm joined by David Simmonds, Shadow Housing Minister and Conservative MP for Ruislip, Norwood and Pinner, Charlie Rowley, former Special Advisor to the Housing Secretary, and Anna Mikhailova, Deputy Editor of the Mail on Sunday. Welcome to Westminster Watch. David, let me start with you. We've just seen Amit's comments there. Is he right?
We do need a long-term plan, and the point about apprenticeships in particular is right. I know that our construction workforce in the UK is ageing. We have an ageing workforce anyway, but we need to make sure we've got the policies and the plans in place so that it's an attractive career for younger people, so that we have the skills that we need to build the homes for the future.
Anna, for decades, for as long as I can remember, governments of every colour have claimed that they're going to build more homes and enough homes. All have failed. Why should we think the Labour government is going to be any different?
Well, I don't think we should be defeatist about it on the outset, but I think the reason past governments have failed is because it is an extremely difficult thing to do. You've touched on some of the issues. One of the main ones is with planning reform. Everyone has always wanted to do planning reform for years now, but when you actually get to it, Michael Gove really tried, but when you get it, when you start putting that legislation through the Commons, you do get every single MP trying to worry about what's going on in their constituency. You do get it laden with amendments, watered down, and that may well happen with this as well. But I think at the outset, this does have the potential to be quite bold, to actually get some things done. Some of the reforms they are attempting or planning with councils, for example, a Labour government is going to find that much easier to get through. So streamlining planning decisions on that front, taking the power away a bit from councils. And I do think, to the point earlier, there is an element of, if you've got a real statement of intent, and Starmer has made this really a priority goal, it's not just one of the goals, it's really one of the flagship goals. If you create that sort of sense of momentum and people in the country start to think, right, they're going to get building, therefore there will be jobs there will be opportunities for investment, that could create momentum of its own.
Do you think, Charlie, that your former boss, the Michael Gove, Secretary of State, effectively responsible for housing, he came up against his MPs, he capitulated, he rode back on some of his ambitious plans. Is there any reason to think, as Anna suggests, the Labour Party are in a stronger position to push through some pretty draconian plans, taking powers away from councils to stop things happening?
And that's just the issue, because I think Labour, as I said, might be in a better position because they can ride roughshod over local communities. That's their plan, effectively. And that's where the tension always lied, particularly in the Conservative government, where you've got local councils, local elected councillors that are making those planning decisions. Everybody wants to see more housing. Everybody can understand that for the next generation, you need more homes to be built for your children and for your grandchildren.
But not all MPs understand it, do they, David? I mean, this is something that Conservatives are traditionally quite strong on.
Planning reform is a red herring. There's already 1.5 million new homes in the UK with planning permission granted. And the issue that we've learnt from many different governments approaching this is that you can have all the new planning reforms that you want. The question is whether the development industry will deliver the homes for which that permission is granted. And pretty much every single part of the country, what we've seen is that resulting in large numbers, because of top-down government targets, of one-bedroom and studio flats, which aren't what's required by the people who are looking for homes in this country. We've got an ageing population that are looking for downsizer homes towards the end of their lives. We have young families that are looking for more space, and the planning system and those targets is not delivering that. What we need to focus on is how we get the development industry, which has only ever really delivered about half the numbers of homes that the government and Parliament has aspired to build the homes for which it already has permission.
Anna, isn't that the disconnect? Governments over the years have always told us how many homes they're going to build. They don't build any homes. The developers build the homes. If the market conditions aren't right, if the incentives aren't there, government can't force them to build those homes. Is the system actually broken where the government set the target and the developers do as they wish?
Well, I think there's a long record of problems with targets in general, and I think if you're not the people delivering something, it's very hard to get them right. One of the problems developers, for example, has nothing to do with the system, it's actually with the financing. So years ago, developers couldn't raise enough money, and a lot of them have to sell a chunk of a development off plan beforehand. So there are these complex issues where you'd have to basically look at the rules on mortgages, you'd have to look at the rules on home buying, on the rules around the regulations around how developers have to build. And I think the government is looking at some of that. I mean, I think there is some reason to be optimistic here. They are certainly doing something. My scepticism with all of this, and I don't know if David might offer some insights, but we talk about how developers are going to need to step up. We talk about regulation changing. We have hundreds and thousands of people stuck in cladding homes. You know, that cladding issue has still not been resolved because those homes are to date still not being renovated quickly enough. So if we can't get that right, I just don't understand how we're suddenly going to build loads and loads more.
Charlie, what were the barriers that stopped you, for example, filling the number of empty homes that we have up and down the country when you were in government, renovating old properties so that they were fit for purpose? What was the barrier? Were you depending on other people to do this? You didn't have direct control over the levers of power to make it happen?
Ultimately, yes, because you require local councils to be able to vote through either those conversions, whether it's old offices into flats, whether it's actually getting the planning permission off the ground, or whether it's actually getting developers that might have bought up a bit of land. Land banking is still an issue that they might actually be sitting on.
Is it because developers say it's not really the case? Who's right here?
Well, I'm always on the side of developers because I want to see more homes being built. But we know, just as the point that Anna was making about cladding and the remediation works, where there are numbers of properties where they still have this awful cladding that is destructible and as we saw in terms of Grenfell Tower. But the issue of housing in general, I just think in terms of the numbers, we'll always see targets.
David, the Labour government have brought forward their planning and infrastructure bill, and they've set out quite a list of things that they're going to do. They're trying to stop the newts and the bats from stopping property development areas go ahead. Broadly, is the opposition, your party, supporting the measures that have come through?
There are some measures that are carryover from what Charlie and others were looking at when we were in government, and we'll support those. And I've got a lot of sympathy with developers around the point that once the local authority, the planning system, has given them permission, they often have to wait for some other bit of government, typically the Environment Agency, Natural England, to give consent before they can actually start work. And we know in a lot of developments that's leading to very lengthy delays.
And Labour are proposing to restrict those powers now.
It's absolutely right that we look at that again. It should be government that makes those decisions through the democratic process, not through arm's length quangos. But as a country, we're a very intensive user of our housing stock. We've got very little vacant property by comparison with any other developed country in the world. And the only time we've ever reached the kinds of housing numbers that are being talked about is when Harold Macmillan was Prime Minister and local authorities built large numbers of homes themselves. And if we're going to achieve anything like the 1.5 million target that Angela Rayner has set herself, then we would need to see a major intervention. The big challenge, of course, is that at the moment we don't have the market conditions in supply of materials, supply of labour, that would make that possible, even though the planning consents are already there.
Can I just press you on that so I understand it? Are you actually suggesting that we should empower be it regional mayors or local authorities, to build houses themselves, own those houses and rent them out? Is that the way forward?
So it's one of the things that's been looked at as part of the levelling up agenda, and clearly reflecting the fact that the UK demographic, our workforce particularly, is changing. The days when you left school, got married at 21, had children by 23, had a job for 40 years in the same company, those days are gone, and we need a housing market that reflects that changing demographic, and that will mean a different approach. And I know a lot of those regional mayors are intended to have the powers to oversee not just housing but also the infrastructure and the business development that goes with it.
What however is the weakness there? Is it that we are still effectively dependent on 3 to 4 major housing builders in this country? The SMEs, the smaller builders, struggle to get a look in. Even if every council was empowered to go and build houses, would we be able to actually get them built?
Well, it's a good point, but I guess if you try and encourage and unleash those market forces in theory, it should become easier for smaller developers to pop up. But there you do still have that red tape, that regulation that makes it really difficult, those issues of access to finance. So I think, their local authorities, the government can do a valuable task if they provide guarantees to developers, if they not necessarily do it themselves directly, but essentially make that there can be schemes that they introduce to introduce that, encourage that building, encourage that financing. It is in theory doable.
I think Anna's absolutely right, but as David said, it's when economic conditions allow, but also it all comes down to money. And when you see councils that are sometimes, going under, they've accumulated huge debts, where actually commissioners have had to be sent in, where the national government has got to take those local authorities under its own control, at what point and how do you regulate perhaps local mayors or regional mayors to be able to say, okay, you want to go and build the homes and the infrastructure,
one of Labour's
we'll give you the money.
ideas.
But if you spend it or if you mismanage it, then of course you get huge debts and that's got to be paid for.
And you've seen that in Croydon, where we had particular examples. But let me take you down this road. One of the great Margaret Thatcher flagship policies was the right to buy your council house. It's quite sensible of the Labour government, isn't it, to be saying, actually, you can sell those off, but the money is going to rebuild us new housing stock. That's something you could get behind as Conservatives, isn't it?
Totally. I mean, I think we should build more social housing. There's no doubt about that. But what I think the current situation, or not just in terms of the economic conditions, but the way in which we're seeing a huge influx of migrants. We're seeing a migrant crisis. I saw a map the other day, that showed that I think in some local authorities, particularly in London, over 50% of their social housing had gone from people that had come into this country from abroad. It wasn't being used, perhaps Londoners, for example, or people that are actually in need. So we've got to get that balance right between public services, social housing, and getting immigration
David,
down.
on that point, you can't really fix the housing supply problem, can you, until you fix immigration in this country?
Well, Charlie is right, that's a big part of it. And of course, what we know is that the overall UK population is growing slightly because the balance between immigration and an ageing population, people dying, needs to be right. And in order to have a sustainable economy, we need to get that balance spot on. Public services require a level of immigration. We need people to work, for example, in the NHS. More than half the working visas issued under the previous government were for the NHS or care sector. So we need those people in order to ensure the standard of living of people in the UK already.
And something that has not been addressed in Labour's plan is tackling the issue of foreign investment in our properties. Now, we have been and spoken to an investigative journalist, Andy Jones, who's written extensively about this. I'd like you to hear what he has to say.
So much of the affordable and social housing in London is given to low-skilled foreign migrants or indeed asylum seekers. So much of the high-end accommodation is sold to foreign investors. In fact, 10,000 homes in Westminster alone are held in foreign tax havens and shell companies. But then you have the middle section of homes left over, which would normally be the kind of things that people like me would buy. Well, they are also being picked off by foreign investors, Singapore, China, Hong Kong, and elsewhere, because they see an opportunity to buy those homes and rent them back to Brits at big markups. That then makes it impossible for people like me to buy a home in this area and then put down roots and have a family and then start the whole process again. We need more homes for native Brits and we need to protect local residents. If you're in Singapore, you can bet against your own pension getting you on the property market. Their property rights there are absolutely enshrined. Nothing like that exists here. In Spain and in Portugal, they're talking about massive taxes on foreign investment, up to 100% tax on properties. I wouldn't necessarily say I'd like it that high. We need a bit of foreign investment to get our economy going. We need foreign workers to do all of the things, all of the jobs we need, and because it's great to have diversity. But also we're in a position where people buy huge amounts of homes from abroad and they don't even live with them. They just rent them back to native Brits. And lo and behold, key workers can't live in London. Around 60% of police officers can't afford to live in the very city that they police in. The same for nurses, the same for teachers, and certainly the same for cleaners and anything else. We need staff to run London, and we need people to be able to live here, to set up families here, to make it the city that it is.
Anna, Andy mentioned their overseas examples. Do you think we need more property rights here in this country, as, for example, he highlighted they have in Singapore?
Possibly. I think this is very London specific, this example, and London property prices are completely ridiculous. I mean, let's be honest, and they have been for a long time. They completely price out young people, they price out families, they price out the older people seeking to retire, like we discussed earlier, and something isn't right there. These developments being built, one of the problems is I think there's so many more ultra prime developments being built, but not enough, just more normal homes. And I think it is a supply and demand thing. People struggle to get mortgages to buy those ordinary homes. More people are renting. And we have had successive governments increasingly put in policies like stamp duty holidays. Instead of building more homes, it's constantly sort of upping. And all of that is inflationary. All of that just causes more money in the system, prices go up and up and up.
Well, whilst on the subject of taxes there, David, Andy referred to Spain, for example, putting in protectionist taxes, they would say, of 100% for countries outside the EU buying properties there. Is tax on foreign investors a part of the solution?
We have looked at that. There are a lot of countries, Denmark as well, that have some form of restriction or taxation rules that apply. But there's very little evidence that would make a big difference. And I think, as we've just heard, this is very much a London-specific thing. From the point of view of the rental sector, having foreign buyers that are willing to invest in the property, put those on the rental market, that's good if you are in that rental market. It's increasing your supply. But part of what we see in the background of that is a function of those top-down housing targets, that the focus has been on high-rise homes that are ideal for a single person or a couple, where we need to be thinking as a country, not just what kind of numbers do we want to hit, but what kind of homes do we want to build and what kind of communities need those homes. And because the focus has been away on that and has been entirely about top-down housing targets, we've lost that. And so in opposition, my party, input from those who got experience around this, will be looking at what looks like a good set of policies to get that market into a better place after the next general election.
Speaking of renting, Charlie, the renting market is not an easy solution for people, extremely high rents. We're still a nation that probably has more people who buy than rent, just about, compared to others in Europe. Do you think the renting market model is broken as well?
I don't think it's broken. I mean, you need a combination of private rented sector, home ownership, social housing. You know, we have quite a blend in this country. I mean, London is very specific. I mean, it's a victim of its own success. It is the financial services centre of the world. Everybody wants to be here.
Affordable rents or affordable purchases, they're not affordable.
And we're saying in support of Charlie, private rented has the highest level of satisfaction of any kind of housing tenure. Those are the happiest people with the homes that they rent.
Happier than homeowners?
Yes.
Let me ask you, final question if I may, quickly for each of you. Do you own your own home, Anna? And what about your kids? I presume you have children here. This could be
She doesn't own yet, she's only 2.
But are you worried about what she might have in the future?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think if it keeps going the way it's been going, I own a home because I was lucky to be of an age where unlike the presenter we just heard from
Andy, yes.
I actually could afford to buy at a time when it was still expensive, but it was affordable.
And David, similar question to you, but will you be the bank of mum and dad, if you like, coming to the rescue of your children, or maybe you have been? What are your fears?
My children are extremely young as well, but I bought my first home in London when I started working at a financial services
company. And how long ago was that?
That was for £34,000 in the late 1990s. Certainly that property would cost a lot more than that today, and I am still a homeowner.
And as a proportion of salary, it was nowhere near the levels people are asking now, is it?
It was still pretty significant, but not as high as it is today. But that's an example of one of the issues that we face. Particularly in London and the southeast of England, there's a real issue with the pressure on the market. If we look at other parts of the country, like areas, for example, in the northeast, house prices have barely changed in 25 years. So we need to respect the fact that we do need, following on things like the mayors and devolution, to have regional and local solutions to this, because a national approach with the top-down housing targets has never delivered.
Charlie, I asked this with some trepidation. Have you been able, at a relatively younger age, to me certainly, been able to get your own home and buy it?
No, I mean, I'm a slight anomaly, though, I think, compared to most young people, because I've been renting for a good maybe.
Are you a happy renter, as David says many of you are?
I am a happy renter. I mean, I do understand that there are lots of people that are, we've got terrible landlords, but by and large, I think most people that do have a rental property are happy with it. But I moved to London when I was 24. I was renting then. I was in a flat share. I think that's how most people start out. I did spend a bit of time abroad as well, so I was renting in Brussels and then coming back to London. So I've always been happy to move around. I've never actually sort of thought about settling down or having some fixed roots. But I will be probably someone that has to rely on selling the family. You know, when people downsize, and that money will trickle down to.
I said last question very quickly. Yes, no for each of you. Anna, will Labour hit its target of 1.5 million homes?
No.
David?
No.
Charlie?
Just on the target, I think it's an underestimate anyway. I think we need more homes than the
Yes or
1.5
no?
million, but I don't think they'll get it. No, I don't think they will.
David Simmonds, Charlie Rowley and Anna Mikhailova, thank you very much
Thank
indeed
you.
for
Thank
joining us here on Westminster Watch. And thanks again to all my guests for joining me, and don't forget to connect with us on X at Westminster TRT. But for now, from me and all the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.